If I were to ask you, what's the difference between spending your time and investing your time? How would you respond? You see, the distinction is profound. When we spend time, it's gone forever. When we invest time, it returns to us with interest, not unlike the principle of compound interest in financial matters. This difference between spending and investing represents one of the most important paradigm shifts in personal effectiveness. We live in a world obsessed with success, but what I've found is that truly effective people are focused on significance, the kind that comes not from managing your time, but from leading your life. Success is about achievement, position, and acclaim. Significance is about contribution, purpose, and meaning. And the bridge between the two isn't found in techniques or shortcuts, but in principles, natural laws that govern human effectiveness regardless of circumstances or conditions. What I call principle-centered time leadership is about your compass, not your clock. Let me explain what I mean by that. Your clock represents the management of your activities, how you spend your hours and minutes. Your compass represents alignment with principles, your true north. When we focus primarily on the clock, we become efficient with things. But when we focus on the compass, we become effective with people and priorities. Effectiveness always precedes efficiency, just as direction precedes speed. This single hour, invested daily in what I call quadrant 2 activities, has the capacity to transform not just your productivity, but your identity, who you fundamentally are. And the reason is clear when we understand the principle. We become what we repeatedly do. Excellence, as Aristotle taught us, is not an act, but a habit, the result of consistent, principle-centered choices. This hour represents not just doing different things, but becoming a different person. We've evolved from to-do lists to scheduling to prioritizing, but what I'm talking about is fourth-generation time leadership, organizing and executing around your deepest priorities. First-generation management was about efficiency and checklists. Second generation brought calendars and appointments. Third generation introduced important values and goals. But fourth generation leadership is about aligning your time with your mission, your roles, and your most important relationships. It's about the wisdom to know what matters most and the courage to act accordingly. This practice embodies the essence of Habit 3, put first things first, and becomes a powerful expression of Habit 7, sharpen the saw. But more importantly, it represents the integration of all 7 habits into a single transformative daily practice. You see, when you dedicate this hour consistently, you're not just implementing a technique, you're living from your center. You're aligning your daily actions with your deepest values. This alignment creates a sense of integrity and congruence that is the foundation of all personal effectiveness. In our time together, I want to share 3 critical elements: the principle behind this hour, how precisely to implement it, and most importantly, how to make it a consistent reality in your life. Because knowing what to do isn't enough. Even knowing how to do it isn't enough. The key to real transformation is consistent, principle-centered action. And that's what we'll focus on together. Not just understanding, but doing. Not just knowing, but becoming. Now, I want you to notice something important here. This 1-hour principle operates as a natural law, like the law of the harvest. You always reap what you sow. You reap after you sow, and you reap more than you sow. Can you see how this applies to your time investment? When you consistently invest this hour in what matters most, you don't just get your hour back, you receive multiplied returns in effectiveness, clarity, and fulfillment. But this harvest doesn't come immediately. There's always a season between planting and harvesting, which requires patience and faith in the principle. What I've observed is that we've shifted from the character ethic, the integrity of aligning our time with our principles, to the personality ethic of quick-fix time management techniques. The difference is profound and fundamental. The character ethic is based on the idea that there are natural laws and principles that govern human effectiveness, just as there are natural laws that govern the physical world. The personality ethic, by contrast, focuses on techniques, shortcuts, and social strategies that promise results without the character foundation. But you see, techniques without principles are like branches without roots. They cannot sustain growth over time. There are three important elements to understand about this principle. First, all meaningful transformation begins from the inside out, from principle to character to behavior. When we try to change from the outside in, from behavior to character to principle, the change rarely lasts. It's like treating symptoms without addressing the underlying cause. Inside-out change means first understanding the principle, then developing the character aligned with that principle, and finally expressing that character through consistent behavior. Second, effectiveness is a matter of balance, what I call the production/production capability balance. Think of production as the golden eggs, the results, the output, the achievements. Production capability is the goose that lays those golden eggs, your capacity to produce results over time. Most time management approaches focus almost exclusively on production, getting more done in less time. But if we neglect production capability, our physical, mental, social, emotional, and spiritual capacity, we eventually diminish our ability to produce at all. This hour maintains that critical balance. And third, the highest leverage activity in your life is planning. Specifically, weekly planning with daily adaptation. When you invest time in planning, you quite literally create time. By identifying what matters most before the week begins, you prevent the urgent from crowding out the important. You move from reacting to creating. And this is perhaps the most important shift of all, from letting life happen to you to happening to life. Not time management, but self-leadership. Think about that distinction for a moment. Management is about controlling external factors. Leadership is about influencing from internal integrity. When you lead yourself from principles, the need for external management diminishes dramatically. Not urgency addiction, but importance focus. Consider what that shift would mean for you. Urgency addiction is a dependency on the adrenaline of crisis and deadline. Importance focus is the discipline of doing what matters before it becomes urgent. This shift alone can transform your experience of time. Not efficiency with things, but effectiveness with people. Let that sink in. We've become remarkably efficient with tasks and technology, yet increasingly ineffective in our most important relationships. True effectiveness begins with people, not things. Not external scheduling, but internal integrity with your deepest priorities. The most carefully crafted schedule means nothing without the character to honor your commitments to yourself and others. Internal integrity, doing what you say you'll do, is the foundation of trust, both with others and with yourself. Just as a farmer understands the seasons of planting and harvesting, this hour operates on the same natural law. Plant this hour consistently and watch with patience as the harvest of transformation grows in your life, slowly, steadily, and then suddenly abundant. The farmer doesn't dig up seeds each day to check their progress. Similarly, this practice requires trust in the principle, even when results aren't immediately visible. But I can promise you this, the harvest always comes to those who plant consistently and with integrity. There are natural positive consequences of this practice: increased clarity, renewed energy, and compounding effectiveness. But there are also natural negative consequences of neglecting it: fragmentation, burnout, and the gradual erosion of your highest capabilities. These aren't punishments, they're natural outcomes. Just as gravity operates whether we acknowledge it or not, these principles of effectiveness operate in our lives regardless of our awareness or acceptance of them. Understanding this causality, this connection between choices and consequences, is essential to principle-centered living. Let me illustrate this principle with Sarah, a physician and mother of 3 who felt constantly torn between her professional demands and family needs. When I first met Sarah, she described her life to me as constantly putting out fires with no time for what mattered most. Her calendar was full, but her heart was empty. She found herself reacting to the urgent demands of both her medical practice and her family life, with little sense of leadership in either domain. Sarah described her life to me as constantly putting out fires, with no time for what mattered most. Like many of us, she was caught in the thick of thin things, responding to the urgent while the important remained neglected. Her effectiveness, both professionally and personally, was diminishing despite her increasing efforts. After understanding the principle we've been discussing, she committed to 1 hour each morning from 5:30 to 6:30 before her family awoke. Now, what did she do in that hour? Let me be specific. She divided her hour into three 20-minute segments. First, she reviewed her family mission statement and identified the most important needs of each family member for that week. Second, she planned specific family activities and one-on-one time with each child. And third, she invested in her own renewal, reading, journaling, or simply sitting in quiet reflection. Before this practice, her family dinners happened only twice weekly, meaningful conversations were rare, and she described her parental role as crisis management. Her children knew her as someone who was always rushing, always stressed, and only partially present, even when physically there. Her relationship with her husband had become primarily functional rather than intimate. Within 6 weeks, family dinners occurred 5 nights weekly. She had individual time with each child, and most importantly, she shifted from reacting to leading her family culture. The tone of their home changed, conversations deepened, and most significantly, Sarah described feeling present and purposeful rather than fragmented and frustrated. Now, think about this for a moment. What really changed? Not external circumstances, but her internal capacity to lead from principle rather than react to urgency. Sarah's schedule remained full. Her responsibilities didn't diminish, but her approach, her paradigm, shifted fundamentally. She moved from management to leadership. Let's look at this from another perspective. Sarah's transformation wasn't about better scheduling techniques. It was about integrity to her deepest values. Do you see the difference? Techniques focus on how to fit more into your schedule. Principles focus on putting the most important things first. Sarah didn't just rearrange her time, she realigned her actions with her values. What might happen in your family relationships if you invested this same hour in leadership rather than management? How might the culture of your home change if you moved from reacting to creating? Michael, a CEO I worked with, faced declining organizational morale and stagnant growth despite working 70-hour weeks. When I first met Michael, he was exhausted, frustrated, and confused about why his extraordinary effort wasn't producing results. He told me, "Stephen, I'm doing everything I can, working harder than everyone else, but nothing's changing." My response was, "That's precisely the problem." You see, Michael was confusing activity with accomplishment, motion with direction. His paradigm was that more hours meant more results, a common but fundamentally flawed assumption. Michael dedicated 1 hour daily from 4 to 5 p.m. to what I call principle-centered leadership planning. Here's exactly what he did. First, he reviewed his organization's mission and values, reconnecting with the why behind the what. Second, he identified the highest leverage leadership activities, those that would create the most significant impact on both results and culture. And third, he practiced empathetic listening by reviewing his notes from employee conversations, seeking to understand their needs and perspectives more deeply. The turning point came when Michael realized, "I've been so busy climbing the ladder that I haven't checked whether it's leaning against the right wall." This moment of clarity, this paradigm shift, changed everything. He saw that his role wasn't to work harder than everyone else, but to create an environment where everyone could do their best work. His organization had 22% turnover, declining market share, and what he described as a culture of firefighting. Decisions were reactive rather than strategic. Innovation had stalled, and most concerning, the vision that had once inspired the company had become obscured by quarterly pressures. Within 5 months, turnover dropped to 8%. They launched 2 innovative initiatives that increased market share by 13%, and most importantly, he described the new culture as energized and purposeful. The most significant indicator wasn't in the metrics, but in the renewed sense of mission that permeated the organization. Notice what really changed, not just his schedule, but his very paradigm about leadership. He shifted from managing things to leading people, from focusing on activities to focusing on outcomes, from working in the business to working on the business. This 1 hour practice didn't just change what he did, it transformed who he was as a leader. David, a sales executive, understood this principle intellectually, but resisted implementation, telling me, "Stephen, I know this makes sense, but I literally don't have an extra hour." His calendar was packed from early morning meetings through evening client dinners. The very suggestion of finding an additional hour seemed impossible to him. His belief that more activity equals more results created an urgency addiction that left no space for importance. Like many high achievers, David had become addicted to the adrenaline of urgency, the rush of constantly putting out fires and meeting deadlines. This paradigm, deeply ingrained in his thinking, created a barrier to implementing the principle. After missing 3 consecutive quarterly targets and experiencing what his doctor called stress-induced health issues, David reached a crucial decision point. Sometimes, you see, we don't change until the pain of not changing exceeds the pain of changing. For David, this moment came when he realized that his approach was not only failing to produce results, but was actively diminishing his health and well-being. Rather than finding an extra hour, David reallocated his hour by eliminating 90 minutes of low-value activities, creating a net time gain while implementing the principle. He conducted what I call a time inventory, tracking how he spent his time for 1 week. What he discovered surprised him. Nearly 2 hours daily were consumed by low-value activities that neither contributed to results nor renewed his capacity. David's recommitment process, without guilt but with resolve, demonstrates an important principle about course correction. So often when we fail to keep commitments to ourselves, we respond with guilt and self-criticism, which rarely leads to positive change. David instead approached his recommitment with the same principle-centered resolve he would bring to an important business decision. His sales conversion rate increased from 12% to 28%, his health markers improved, and most significantly, he described feeling in control for the first time in years. The most important outcome wasn't the improved metrics, but the shift from being driven by external demands to being led by internal principles. There's an important lesson here about the space between stimulus and response. David's circumstances didn't change. His response to them did. Viktor Frankl taught us that between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our freedom and power to choose. David expanded that space through his daily hour of principle-centered leadership, creating room for choice rather than reacting to urgency. Now, I'd like you to pause for a moment and consider which of these stories most resonates with your current situation. What principle speaks most directly to your life right now? Have you ever noticed the difference in your effectiveness when you take time for renewal versus when you don't? These questions aren't merely rhetorical, they're an invitation to reflect on how these principles might apply in your specific circumstances. There are 3 essential elements to establishing any habit, including this transformative hour. I call this the knowledge, skill, desire framework. Understanding this framework is critical because it addresses the 3 dimensions necessary for any lasting change. Let me unpack each element methodically. First, you must understand the why, the principle behind the practice. This isn't just about efficiency, it's about character, integrity, and living from your center. Knowledge answers the question, what to do and why. When you deeply understand that this hour isn't merely a productivity technique, but a principle-centered approach to leadership in all domains of your life, your motivation becomes intrinsic rather than extrinsic. You're not doing it because someone told you to, you're doing it because you understand the natural law that governs effectiveness. Second, you need the how, the specific process for making this hour effective. Let me walk you through exactly what this looks like. Skill is about method and process, knowing how to implement the principle in your specific circumstances. Without clear process, even the best intentions remain unfulfilled. This is where many people falter. They understand the importance of principle-centered leadership, but they lack the specific methodology to implement it consistently. Third, you need the want to, the motivation that comes from connecting this practice to your deepest values. Consider this question: what matters most to you that currently isn't receiving your best time and energy? Desire is about motivation, the will to act on what you know and how to do it. This comes from connecting the practice to your deepest values and highest priorities. When this hour becomes an expression of what matters most to you, consistency follows naturally. What I call the PCR method, plan, create, and renew, provides the structure for this transformative hour. Let me explain precisely what each component entails. This structure balances the three essential activities that drive transformation: intentional planning, focused creation, and deliberate renewal. Planning component, 20 minutes. Begin with your mission statement and roles: parent, professional, community member, etc. Your mission statement serves as your constitution, your personal true north that guides all other decisions. Your roles represent the key domains where you're called to lead, not just manage. Identify 2 to 3 big rocks for each role for the week ahead. These big rocks are your most important priorities, the quadrant 2 activities that will create the greatest positive impact if accomplished. By limiting to 2 to 3 per role, you ensure focus rather than fragmentation. Schedule these first before the calendar fills with urgent matters. This is critical. What gets scheduled gets done. By placing these big rocks on your calendar first, you ensure that the important isn't crowded out by the merely urgent. Review your upcoming week against your mission and values. This final step in planning creates alignment between your calendar and your constitution, ensuring that how you spend your time reflects what matters most to you. Creating component, 20 minutes. Focus on what I call creative production in your highest leverage role. This is about identifying where your contribution creates the greatest impact and dedicating focused time to that role. This might be developing strategy, writing important communications, or preparing for key conversations. The specific activity will vary based on your roles and priorities, but the principle remains constant. Focus on high leverage creation rather than low value reaction. The key is focusing on quadrant 2 activities, important but not urgent. These activities, like relationship building, personal development, planning, and prevention, typically don't scream for attention, which is precisely why they require intentional focus. Work with the end in mind, focusing on outcomes rather than activities. Ask yourself, what result am I seeking rather than what task am I completing? This shifts your focus from busyness to effectiveness, from activity to accomplishment. Renewing component, 20 minutes. Physical renewal, brief, high-intensity exercise, or mindful movement. Physical capacity is the foundation of all other capacities. Even brief, intentional physical activity increases energy, mental clarity, and emotional stability. Mental renewal, focused reading of principle-centered material. What you read shapes how you think. By consistently exposing yourself to principle-centered ideas, you reinforce the paradigms that support your effectiveness. Spiritual renewal, meditation, prayer, or reflection on your principles. This connects you to your source, your sense of meaning, purpose, and contribution. It's about transcending the immediate and connecting with the eternal. Social emotional renewal, journal writing focused on relationships. Relationships are the context for all accomplishment and fulfillment. By reflecting on key relationships, you increase your awareness and capacity to build emotional bank accounts with others. The optimum approach is a weekly planning session of 60 to 90 minutes on Sunday evening, where you identify your big rocks, then daily sessions to adapt to changing circumstances while maintaining principle focus. Weekly planning provides the architecture, daily adaptation provides the flexibility to respond to changing circumstances without losing sight of what matters most. During weekly planning, identify your roles and 2 to 3 important outcomes for each role. This creates focus and intentionality for the week ahead. By limiting outcomes to 2 to 3 per role, you ensure depth rather than shallow fragmentation across too many priorities. Then schedule your big rocks first, the most important quadrant 2 activities. This is the essence of habit 3, put first things first. When you schedule the big rocks before the gravel, sand, and water, they fit. When you do the reverse, the big rocks never fit. In your daily hour, take the first 5 minutes to review and recommit to these weekly priorities. This creates continuity between your weekly plan and daily execution. It reminds you of your big picture priorities before the urgency of the day takes over. Let me share a specific implementation sequence with first, second, third actions to help you begin. First action, identify your personal mission and key roles this week. Without clarity about your mission and roles, all other planning lacks foundation. This step connects your actions to your identity. Second action, schedule this hour at your highest energy time of day. For most people, this is early morning, but the principle is to align your most important activities with your highest energy. This creates a multiplier effect on your effectiveness. Third action, prepare your environment with all necessary materials and remove potential distractions. Environment often defeats willpower. By intentionally structuring your environment to support your practice, you dramatically increase your likelihood of consistency. Now let's address some common barriers and their principle-centered solutions. You may be thinking, I don't have an extra hour. This isn't about finding more time. It's about investing current time differently. Consider conducting a time inventory to identify low-value activities. Most people are surprised to discover how much time is consumed by activities that produce little real value. Another barrier might be, I'm not sure what my highest priorities should be. This is precisely why the hour is needed, to create clarity about what matters most. The very practice of asking what matters most creates the clarity you're seeking. Begin with the question rather than waiting for the answer. You might face the barrier of interruptions. Remember, this is about making and keeping commitments to yourself with the same integrity you keep commitments to others. Would you consistently cancel important appointments with your most valued clients or family members? Apply the same standard to this appointment with yourself. Think of this hour as your personal production capability investment. Just as you would maintain important equipment in a factory, this hour maintains your most important asset, yourself. No farmer would plant continuously without giving the soil time to regenerate. Similarly, no person can continuously produce without renewal. The principle is balance, addressing both immediate needs, production, and long-term capacity, production capability. Both are essential. Production without production capability leads to burned-out people and worn-out resources. Production capability without production becomes self-indulgent and loses its purpose. Most people sacrifice production capability when pressed for results, but this creates a downward spiral. This hour reverses that spiral. When urgency increases, the natural tendency is to sacrifice importance. But this creates a downward spiral where diminished capability leads to diminished results, which increases urgency, which further diminishes investment in capability. This hour breaks that cycle, creating instead an upward spiral of increased capability, improved results, decreased urgency, and greater capacity for important investment. Now, I want you to notice something important here. When these habits integrate within this hour, something remarkable happens, what I call synergy, where the whole becomes greater than the sum of its parts. It's like bringing together two wooden sticks. Separately, each can bear a small amount of weight, but properly joined, they can support exponentially more. That's what happens when these principles work together in this transformative hour. Begin with the end in mind provides direction during this hour. Without a clear sense of your mission, values, and vision, all efficiency is misdirection. This habit ensures that your planning isn't just about doing things right, but about doing the right things. It's the difference between efficiently climbing a ladder and ensuring that ladder is leaning against the right wall. Put first things. First provides the prioritization methodology. Once you're clear on what matters most, this habit gives you the framework to consistently place those priorities at the center of your life, not the periphery. It's the practical application of your mission and values in your daily calendar and decisions. Sharpen the saw ensures balanced renewal across all dimensions. This habit recognizes that effectiveness isn't just about production, but about production capability, your capacity to produce results over time. Without renewal, even the most important activities eventually become exercises in diminishing returns. Think win-win frames how you approach relationships in your planning. This habit moves you from a competitive to a cooperative mindset in how you approach both your schedule and your interactions. It helps you consider how your priorities and commitments affect others, creating sustainable solutions rather than temporary fixes. Seek first to understand guides your communication planning. This habit ensures that your interactions are based on empathy rather than projection. When you plan conversations and meetings with this principle in mind, you move from reaction to understanding, from judgment to insight. Together, these create what I call an upward spiral of growth and effectiveness. Each principle reinforces and amplifies the others, creating momentum that builds upon itself, while a downward spiral gains negative momentum, making each step more difficult. An upward spiral gains positive momentum, making progress increasingly natural. Consider how these principles stack upon each other. When you begin with the end in mind, you gain clarity. When you put first things first, from that clarity, you gain focus. When you sharpen the saw, with that focus, you gain energy. This compounding effect is what creates transformation. It's not linear, it's exponential. And that's the difference between incremental improvement and fundamental transformation. This is similar to opening a combination lock. One number by itself doesn't open the lock. Even two correct numbers won't do it. But when all numbers align in the right sequence, the lock opens effortlessly. That's how these principles work together, creating an alignment that unlocks potential that no single principle could access alone. This hour addresses your whole person, physical, mental, social, emotional, and spiritual. The effectiveness of this practice comes from its comprehensive approach. Just as your life cannot be compartmentalized, your personal leadership shouldn't be either. Each dimension affects and is affected by the others. Physical dimension, energy management through renewal activities and planning for physical well-being. Your physical condition affects everything else. Your mental clarity, your emotional stability, your spiritual sensitivity. By addressing this dimension, you build the foundation for effectiveness in all areas. Mental dimension. Focus on high-leverage thinking and learning during your creating time. Clear, principled thinking is a competitive advantage in any field. By investing in your mental development, you increase your capacity to see options, solve problems, and create value in all your roles. Social emotional dimension, relationship planning that builds your emotional bank account with key people. No success in the public arena can compensate for failure in the home. By intentionally planning for relationship investment, you ensure that your most important connections receive your best energy, not what's left over. Spiritual dimension, alignment with your deepest values and principles during reflection time. This dimension provides the context and meaning for all others. Without a sense of purpose and principle, even the most efficient life lacks fulfillment and direction. This dimension answers not just what and how, but why. This hour operates from what I call an abundance mentality rather than a scarcity mentality. You're not losing an hour. You're gaining effectiveness in all remaining hours. A scarcity mentality sees time as a zero-sum game. An hour spent in planning is an hour lost in production. An abundance mentality recognizes that an hour invested in planning creates more effective use of all other hours. Think of it this way. Would a lumberjack consider time spent sharpening the saw as time taken away from cutting trees? Only if he didn't understand the principle of effectiveness. The sharper the saw, the more effective the cutting. Similarly, this hour doesn't take away from your productivity, it multiplies it. When you invest in principle-centered leadership of your life, you experience increasing returns, the hallmark of natural laws. Unlike artificial or man-made systems that often deliver diminishing returns, natural laws provide increasing returns over time. Just as a small seed can produce a tree that bears thousands of fruits, each containing more seeds, this 1 hour investment produces exponential returns in effectiveness, fulfillment, and contribution. Remember, this transformative hour isn't a technique. It's the application of natural laws that govern human effectiveness. It works because it aligns with principles that don't change, despite our changing circumstances. Just as gravity operates consistently regardless of our awareness or acceptance of it, these principles of effectiveness operate in our lives whether we recognize them or not. The question isn't whether they work, it's whether we work with them. Viktor Frankl taught us that between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our freedom and power to choose our response. This hour is about expanding that space, creating room for choice rather than reacting to urgency. When we live reactively, that space narrows until stimulus and response seem inseparable. We feel we have no choice but to react to whatever demands press most urgently. But this hour widens that space, restoring our freedom to choose based on principle rather than pressure. I invite you to make a commitment to yourself, not to me, but to your own highest purposes and principles. This isn't about impressing others or even about pleasing me. It's about integrity to what matters most to you, to your mission, your values, and your deepest priorities. It's about becoming the person you're capable of becoming. First, commit to a specific time for this hour in your schedule. Be precise. Decide exactly when this hour will occur in your day. Morning works best for most people, but the principle is to align with your highest energy and least interruptions. Without this specificity, good intentions remain just that, intentions without implementation. Second, commit to protect this time with the same integrity you would protect a commitment to your most valued person. If this hour were an appointment with the person you respect most in the world, would you casually reschedule it? Would you allow interruptions? Would you arrive unprepared? Honor this commitment to yourself with the same integrity you bring to your most important relationships. Third, commit to evaluate your progress weekly, not against others' standards, but against your own mission and principles. This isn't about comparison with others, which often leads to discouragement or pride. It's about alignment with your own deepest values. Ask not, how am I doing compared to others, but how am I doing compared to what matters most to me? You might hear an internal voice saying, this sounds good, but I'm different. My circumstances are unique. Remember, while circumstances vary, principles don't. Your responsibility, your ability to respond to circumstances based on principles rather than conditions is always available to you. This isn't about denying the reality of your circumstances. It's about recognizing that between those circumstances and your response lies your freedom to choose. Think about flying an airplane. The circumstances, weather patterns, wind currents, mechanical issues are largely beyond the pilot's control. But the response to those circumstances, the constant small adjustments in direction and altitude, those belong entirely to the pilot. Your life works the same way. You can't control all circumstances, but you always retain the ability to respond based on principles rather than conditions. For the next 21 days, commit to this one principle-centered hour. This isn't about perfection, it's about direction. If you miss a day, don't focus on the failure. Recommit without guilt to the principle. Research suggests that it takes approximately 21 days to establish the neural pathways of a new habit. During this time, consistency matters more than perfection. The goal isn't an unbroken record. It's an established pattern aligned with principle. Each day, ask yourself, did I keep my commitment to myself with integrity? This builds what I call personal trustworthiness, the foundation of all effectiveness. When you make and keep commitments to yourself, you build confidence in your own integrity. This self-trust becomes the foundation for all other dimensions of trust, in relationships, in organizations, and in communities. Consider for a moment, what difference would it make if you invested 1 hour daily in what matters most for the next year, the next decade? What legacy would that create in your most important roles? This isn't just about productivity, it's about purpose. Not just about success, but significance. not just about achievement, but contribution. The compound effect of this daily practice extends far beyond efficiency into the realm of legacy. This works because it's based on natural laws that govern human effectiveness, just as gravity governs the physical world. It's not about your circumstances, it's about your choices within those circumstances. And the most important choice you can make is to lead your life from principles rather than be managed by urgency. When urgency rules, importance suffers. When principles lead, both urgent and important matters find their proper place. Remember, we're not just human beings, we're human becomings. And this hour is your commitment to becoming your highest and best self. Each day presents not just tasks to complete, but identity to develop. This hour isn't ultimately about doing more, it's about becoming more aligned with principle, more connected with purpose, more effective in contribution. As you implement this practice, you'll discover something profound. The quality of your life is determined not by what happens to you, but by what happens in you, by the principles that guide you, the priorities that drive you, and the practices that define you. This 1 hour, invested consistently in what matters most, will transform not just your calendar, but your character, not just your schedule, but your soul, not just how you spend your time, but who you become through time. The choice is yours, not a choice between success and failure, but between the good and the best, between reacting to life and creating your life, between being driven by circumstance and being led by principle. I invite you to choose the best to create and to lead, beginning with this one transformative hour each day.